in this neighborhood. We moved into this house in 1945. I had always heard that it was built in 1919. I understand now that it was built in 1921. It was built by a man named Louis Santos Jr. He was born in Los Angeles, educated in France, and was appointed by the French government as the Consul General for Los Angeles. So when he built this house, he built it as a consulate.
We were in escrow in a house over in Arden, but decided not to go through with that if he was going to go away in the service, because at the Country Club Manor in those days, it was a full service building, and we would be in better shape, you know.
First to I think it was a Craftsman house on Irola Street, south of Wilshire.
Well, I grew up on 1103 South Wilton Place, which was between 10th Avenue and Country Club Drive.
After my brother and I were born, they decided they needed a larger home. That's when they built this home in 1928.
He exchanged the house and we moved to 8th and Bronson.
We had bicycles. We'd bicycle, gosh, to the planetarium or wherever, even out to the San Fernando Valley.
This was an empty lot, and it had big, tall weeds, and if you pull them up by the throat, you know, or by the hair, or whatever, at the bottom there's this the whole root cluster with the mud, and so you threw them at one another. So we had a wonderful time.
You get all dirty and muddy.
Wilton Place was a very nice school. It was about one long block from where our house was, and I just used to walk and come back, and then when we went to John Burroughs, we used to walk. Nowadays, I don't know, people take cars everywhere and they pick them up, and we were always on our own.
Streetcars all over the place. They were cheap. I forgot, you had tokens.
Buses then were the double-decker. It was always quite an adventure to go on the bus.
I remember when we first moved in, we had a car, and I think it was a Buick with a rumble seat, and that was very exciting.
I took the Model T and went down to LA High and cut out the section on Model T Fords from the library, went home and rewired it with my mother's extension cords, and a few things like that, and finally got it running.
And we were driving down Pico Boulevard. My parents still didn't know I had it. Driving down Pico Boulevard, and the headlights were going dim. And I said, well, I've got to get this generator revved up, so I'm going to go real fast down this hill. Well, real fast was probably 45 or 50, and the police got me. And the parents found out, and the car was gone.
Records were popular then. Remember, we didn't have television, of course. And the Marlboro girls all sort of congregated there after school, so consequently the boys all came too. And I don't know how many records he sold, but he always had a crowd of kids in there, and he was one of these fellows that was glad to have them, knew everybody by name, lived at the beach and would invite the kids down on the weekend and cook hamburgers and things like that. Ross Stratton, wonderful old guy.
Well, everyone went to dancing school, and dancing school was very formal. The little girls wore white gloves. Well, we all wore white gloves, and then little boys took out a handkerchief and put it around the waist, and then they'd get nervous and they'd grab your dress in the back, and you'd sort of feel impaled. But we started when we were 5 doing ballroom dancing, and it went on until we graduated from high school.
Of course, the war came along. That was one of the first things, and I was a air raid messenger. That was my contribution to the war. I don't think I contributed very much, but you had to have a bicycle, you had to be 12 years old, and be willing to get up in the middle of the night if they had a air raid, which we had several people who lived here would remember.
I volunteered for the Navy and went into what they called radio tech school in those days.
Well, I was affected in that I had married in January of 1943, and My husband was in training in the Army, and he was killed in August of 1943 in training. The whole crew he was in, and it was bombardier training, and there was an accident and they were all killed.
And my twins were born D-Day +2, so I was sitting on the couch waiting for D-Day and waiting for the twins, and finally they came.
As far as the neighborhood goes, I'd like to see it preserved.
I felt proud to grow up in this area. I really did.
It's been a happy place that I grew up in and that my children then grew up in.
So far, I'm lucky to be 90 years old, and I love where I live right here, and it isn't all apartments yet, and we're still enjoying life.